Well, hey, everyone. Welcome back again to this episode of the podcast. I'm really excited about this particular conversation. I have with me today Will Frederick, and Will is a newer friend of mine, and he is currently a founder and managing partner of Right Place Enterprises. And Right Place Enterprises is a Pittsburgh-based advisory firm with Silicon Valley roots. I'm going to get to that. I can't wait to talk to you about your Silicon Valley roots. And he combines, and the Right Place Enterprises combines deep industry knowledge and expertise in strategy and operations and financial management and organizational transformation. Will's had a lot of different roles as CFO in publicly traded companies in a variety of different industries. He has successfully completed sale transactions and has had earlier roots with the Walt Disney Company, Hughes Aircraft, and Ford Aerospace, just to name a few, which I'm really curious about the Walt Disney Company, so we'll get into that too. Will is the executive director and COO for the Next Act Fund, which is Pittsburgh's only angel investment fund focused on women-owned and women-led companies. He's also an active member in Blue Tree Allied Angels, which is Pittsburgh's largest organization of accredited private equity investors. And they invest in new cutting-edge and startup companies in Western Pennsylvania and the surrounding regions. Will's also been really active and actively involved in several nonprofit organizations. He's currently a board member of Our Clubhouse, an organization that he and I serve together in, and he's chairman of the finance committee. And better him than me on the finance committee. He's been a previous board member and treasurer for Kelly Strayhorn Theater and a board member and a member of the fund development committee of the YMCA Camp Campbell. So he's got a lot of experience, a lot of broad experience, and I'm so excited to have the conversation with him today. So, hey, Will, welcome. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. I was following that intro, and I thought, wow, I really did all those things. But I guess get to this age, there's a lot of things you can do.
You know, it is. It's always funny. You sit there to listen to any intro, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. But over a period of time, you accumulate some experiences. I'd love to be able to hear about like how. Tell me about your Silicon Valley roots, and then how you got to Western PA.
Yeah, happy to do that. I actually grew up in Southern California, so Orange County is where I started, and then kind of graduated from college and went to Los Angeles area. In that process, we sold a company to a company that was in Northern California, Silicon Valley, and when we sold it, they decided they wanted to take me with it, so we relocated up to Northern California, and then sort of spent the next 25 years or so working with Silicon Valley public companies as well as private startups, large companies, small companies, a little bit of everything. And then decided I was going to retire about 4 years ago. And I checked with my wife and realized I wasn't allowed to retire. It was not for any other reason than I'm not going to be sitting at home with nothing to do. She knows me better than I know myself.
I love it.
So started doing consulting, and one of my clients was here in Pittsburgh. I was coming out visiting with them, and just really fell in love with the area. Didn't realize before then all the tech activity that was going on out here, the transitions of the city. Everybody told me, over the last 5-10 years, things have changed dramatically with restaurants, activities to do. And it was a great group of folks that I was running into. So my wife and I, it's just the two of us at this stage, we thought, what better than to take an adventure? I can't say that we made the decision for the weather, but
sure.
She's in the medical field. So there's plenty of opportunities here as well.
Yeah.
And we've loved it ever since.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask you how you have adjusted to the weather, because I know that had to be a major adjustment.
Yeah, it was funny. I fortunately met one of the bankers that I work with. He had moved from Arizona, So he told me some of the things not to do that will make you look pretty stupid. His first one was he took an umbrella when it was snowing, thinking that if it's snowing, raining, you must take an umbrella to work, and pretty quickly learned that was a bad idea. But I still have to have regular phone calls as to, is this snow deep enough that I have to salt the driveway? Almost pulled up all of the beautiful flowers that we have that are perennials, not knowing that they weren't weeds. And then I still have to ask neighbors, the difference between a weed and a flower. And then I think the groundhog was the first time we had one of those in the yard last year. My wife and I had no idea what it was.
What it really was. Oh, that's funny.
Oh yeah, no idea.
That's great. What motivated you to get into, your work and being a CFO, being into finance and business and working with the companies that you have? I always love to start with the origin story and just kind of find out what was it that drew you to that.
Yeah. I think like everybody, I went to college knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and I was going to be a doctor.
Okay.
So I started pre-med actually for a couple of years. And then some of the best advice I've gotten along the way, one of them was, before you make a serious career decision, especially at that age, go try doing in what it is to the extent that you can in the environment. Work with people who have that job, and just find out generally what folks think who are doing what you want to do. And surprisingly, that's one of the fields that I found most of the responses I got were not overly positive. A lot of, maybe it was just the hospital I was working with and the doctors I talked to. They enjoyed it, but the amount of time it took to get to that point in their life, the amount of time it took away from their family, really, I think I sum it in one statement that I heard, and I still remember it to this day, all those years ago. One of the doctors said, he was a general practitioner. He said, a third of the people that come and see you will have nothing wrong with them, but they're going to come see you and there's nothing you can do. A third of them will have something wrong with them, but it has to run its course, so there's nothing you can do. Yeah. And a third of them will come to you with something you can do. So he said, as long as you're okay with 1/3 of the people that you meet with being able to treat, then general practice medicine would be for you. And that really wasn't my thing. I like to get involved in something, and knew that it had to be a career where hard work leads to results and something more measurable than a third of the time. So immediately changed and decided everything from mathematics, physics, chemistry, a lot of the sciences. And then I found myself sitting in an accounting class after having taken roughly maybe 3.5 years of calculus, and realized I'm actually in a room where I feel really comfortable that these are the people I'll be competing against in this field, versus some of those physics classes where I knew I would never compete with those PhD candidates. I mean, there's some real rocket scientists out there, and it wasn't for me. And not to say that accounting's easy. It just, for my brain, it worked the best.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of went into finance and accounting, wanted to see both sides of it. And then that led me into the jobs that I took.
Oh, that's interesting. What was there a point in your career as you progressed in just your leadership and your own personal growth that it was maybe what I would call a pivotal moment where you thought, wow, this is really cool, and I'm really getting into not just the accounting side of the business, but the strategy, the leadership, those elements of business. Was there ever a moment like that?
Yeah, I probably name a couple. And again, I'm somebody who firmly believes some of the best things you'll learn are from listening to somebody who's already done it and them telling you ways to shortcut the process.
Yeah.
And so, not to say that I was in my teenage years a follower of that. Like most of us probably spent your time being told one thing and doing another.
Right.
But definitely in my career, I've learned that, look, it's much easier to listen to somebody who's already done what you're trying to accomplish. And so one of the real turning points for me was, like I said, I had the accounting background in finance, but I was in a room with a controller and a CFO. And the discussion came about with regards to what the two of those, two individuals were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that the controller would very easily speak about the historical results of the company and reporting them with all of the rules to follow GAAP that are out there. And the CFO spoke more about where the company was going and the sort of future direction and forecasting and understanding how to take strategy and really break it down into bite-sized steps with the dollars that are required to achieve those. But as I listened to the two of them, I could see, wait a second, the controller is really getting uncomfortable with the future finance discussions.
Uh-huh.
And this is, again, for those who are familiar with Sarbanes-Oxley,
Yep.
which is a lot of rules around things that finance folks got creative with. It was the accountant view was, how do you stay in the box and look at historical information? And the finance view was, how do you get outside the box, and sometimes as far outside the box as possible. And for me, it was the realization, look, I need to know both these skill sets, because I found that when you listen to one side talk, it may be different, or it may be in a way that if you don't understand it well enough, you can make some really bad decisions. And so for me, that was, I want to do something more than just the historical numbers. I want to do something more than just the forecast. I want to sort of take a role that's encompassing both of those. So my role started to become more, I'll call it CFO, controller, or COO, in a sense of really, how do you understand the entire business, but take that really important information, what I guess today they call that the data-driven decisions, right?
Yeah.
Back then, you ran everything and got your numbers, but now it's very much data-driven decision-making, but really having a sense of where the organization's trying to go in leveraging that information. So that was my sort of first, where do you want to go career-wise? And then another one, which I always laugh in hindsight, was I was talking to somebody about a senior executive meeting that was taking place. And the comment they made, again, sticks with me today, was, look, here's the way this works if you really want to be instrumental in the success of companies, especially large organizations. It's not that everybody in that room is smarter than you. It's just they're in that room.
Yeah.
So when I worked with large organizations, whether it was understanding the dynamics, power dynamics, the political dynamics, making sure that you get included in rooms is extremely important. And so, as I said, I've, as you mentioned, bounced around from small organizations to very large organizations. And the small ones, it's easy to get in the room. You just usually walk in the door. And the large organizations, it takes a little bit more work, but you want to be in the room. And generally, if you've done your homework and you've paid attention and you know technically competent, you're just as smart as the rest of the people in that room, and you can make a contribution. So.
I love that. You know, one of my mentors always talks about being in the room as well, and it's always there are elements of being in that room that you pick up things, you pick up nuances, you pick up either some kind of leadership, tips or some learning. So how did you get to be like in the room? What was did you have a strategy, or did you just, I'd love to know that, because I think that's really, I think any emerging leader would love to know, well, how do I get in the room? How do I get invited? How do I get maybe you don't get invited. So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I was always a believer that you got invited. So I can't comment on how to just get in the room without
Right.
being invited, but I'm sure there's tactics to
There's
that.
ways, I'm sure.
Um, for me, I always looked at it as, and this is an approach I'd probably say that comes into play very much as a consultant. You probably see it as well. And to some extent, it's probably been a little bit of a shift in more recent times that I always viewed my job as how to make my boss's job as easy as possible.
Mm,
So my career advancement wasn't as focused on how do I get as much out of this for me
mm-hmm,
as it is how do I do whatever I need to make my boss's job easy and get him promoted.
mm-hmm.
And the funny thing that sort of happens is when you get your boss promoted and you help them do it, a lot of times somebody fills that space and you can be the person that fills it.
Feels it, yeah.
In the room, when your boss is in the room and you're the one helping them with the information, you're the one coaching them, you're the one really making sure that they're going to do the best they can in the room. I always ended up in the room. So it didn't mean I sat at the table, but it certainly meant I sat in the room with other advisors, and then over time, as you contribute, you sort of moved your way up through the organization.
I love that. No, I think that's fantastic advice. It reminds me of Zig Ziglar. He talks about, if you can help other people get what they want, you'll ultimately get what you want. It's not the motivation, but and I think that's exactly the principle you're talking about there, helping your boss look good and helping your boss get to where they need to go. That's great advice. Great advice.
I think as a consultant too. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Go.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it is almost the consultant mentality much more than a lot of employees sort of look, companies need to entice me to come work for them. Again, I'll make some broad statements, but feel free to edit them out so I don't get in trouble. But there is certainly the companies need to convince me why I should be here. But in my view, once you're there, if your goal is to move up that organization or learn as much as you can, similar to a consulting role, it's not my job to get hired by the company, but it's my job to make my employer make their life as easy as possible. You probably see the same thing. That it's almost a consulting focus is how I would categorize that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. When you were in in those rooms and you were with some of these senior leaders, what was your biggest tool, or what was the tool that you used the most to be able to help your boss look good and be the best that they could be, and really maybe learn the most as well?
Yeah, I don't know if it's KYS, know your stuff.
Yes, right.
I mean, I can never overemphasize how important it is to really do your research, and whether that's talking to other individuals who have the information, getting into the systems, really finding out what's in there. I worked with a bankruptcy attorney years and years ago. Again, another person who gave me great advice, and we were spending hours upon hours getting ready for a bankruptcy case. And I said to him at one point, I said, the likelihood of this stuff ever mattering is so insignificant. Why are we doing it? I mean, why do we need to have this much research and data and knowledge on the topic? And he looked at me and he said, because he goes in the room knowing more than anybody else. And he wants to make sure that there is nothing that somebody's going to ask that he hasn't prepared for, even if the likelihood is insignificant. Mm. And so for me, again, I took that as there's no such thing as over-prepared. You hear people say, what's the return on investment sometimes for doing too much research? For me, I always found that, look, if you're the person in the room who happened to know that information because you spent the extra effort to find it, you'll become invaluable, and people will see you that way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's great advice too. One of the things I was going to ask you, I was curious. Speaking of preparing, I was preparing for this conversation. One of the things you said on your website is what makes a successful company. I think it was 5 things. So leadership, culture, access to capital, planning, and execution. And if you were to think of all 5 of those elements, is there one of those that you feel like is the most important, or do they work in synergy? Tell me what your thoughts are on those things.
Yeah, it's an interesting question that's actually come up a lot more recently in the work I'm doing with Next Act Fund, which is now that I've kind of gotten to a point in life where I'm doing more investment-focused activities, same with Blue Tree, Allied Angels, where it's really trying to understand the likelihood of success for an early stage company that you're going to be investing in. And I will say this, I've heard others say it, and I really do believe it, is that the top of that list has got to be leadership. And I would even say at the top of that is, for a small organization, it's the CEO. Yeah. And then as you sort of get in bigger companies, it's who's the department lead or the division lead or whoever's in charge of that group. And that's not to say they're the most important person, because that's not the case. Yeah. But if you think about culture and you think about execution, you even think about the team that's running the group or that's running the company, they're in a sense byproducts of the leadership, the CEO, department head, and the way they want to run that organization. So when I found you go into a group and there's a really good culture there, but maybe a new leader comes in, the culture can change, because that's the direction the leader wants to take it. A leader who has built a great team, and in most cases, those leaders are not telling everybody what to do. That the really good ones are listening to what everybody has to say. Yeah. And so they've brought in a team that is capable of telling what needs to be done. And those individuals, again, if they're successful, have built their teams with people who are very talented. And so it's not to say the person at the top is the most important, but I will say everything that seems to work well is when the person at the top is engaged and has an understanding of what it takes to be successful with an organization.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You actually answered a question that came to my mind: is what makes a great leader? And it's what you said was, it's not telling them what to do, but it's listening and asking good questions. And I think that's so true. When you go in to look at companies and you look at the leadership and you also look at the culture of an organization, how do you know, like, what's a good culture? What's your measurement? How do you measure that?
I wish I had a really easy answer for that, to say I've got this list of 10 things, I check the boxes, and anything 8 out of 10 or more is a winner. Unfortunately, I don't. What I will say is a couple of things that usually I'm looking for, and it's as basic as when you ask the CEO about the company, if what I'm hearing is all the things they've done versus all the things the team has done, I get uncomfortable, because that sounds like somebody who thinks they're doing everything instead of really being successful with the team they have. I'm looking for generally that ability to understand their place in the market. And so again, good leaders to me aren't ones who just focus on what's important now, today, with what they're doing, the company's doing, but they can sit in a room and explain to you, here's what we as a company are doing, and here's what other people doing similar things or related things in the space or where the market's going. So it's that broader awareness of the marketplace, as well as an awareness of the team that surrounds them.
Yeah. Yeah. Team is so important. I think that I think probably the older I've gotten too, the more I've realized that. I think in my younger years, I was, the maverick. I wanted to do it all. I found out really fast that you can't do it all.
Yeah. Again, you go back to life lessons.
Exactly.
I'll never forget, my early career as a single guy. I used to read lots of management books and styles, and I had this belief that I think it was the old everything needs to be perfect. I mean, there is no excuse for mistakes. If you look at our job, like building airplanes, you can't have an airplane fall out of the sky, and therefore everybody should be as motivated and exciting as I am to be here working on this project. Yeah. And then got married, divorced, and I was a single parent. And I'd come home, and my son would, like most little kids, 2 years old, 3 years old, never listen to most of what I said.
Right.
Not clean up the room, not eat the dinner. And I realized, wait a second, not everybody is as motivated to do the things you want to do. And just as a kid who's going to do what's important to them, employees need to be motivated with what's important to them. So not equating employees to children, but for my learning experience, it was, look, what I think is important is not necessarily important to everybody else. And you've got to learn how to communicate that importance. You've got to learn to modify your own view, and then it makes you a better leader, in my opinion.
Yeah, boy, that's such a good point. Being able to listen and modify your own view. I think, boy, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm curious more than anything. Where have you seen those kinds of leaders in your own career? Have you experienced those kinds of leaders? And I guess if so, what impact did they have on your life?
Yeah, I would say I've seen both extremes.
Yes.
and like you, over time, you sort of realize both extremes are actually very invaluable life lessons, because as much as you want to learn what to do right, you want to learn what's wrong not to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody goes off intentionally to do things that wreck companies or create friction with employees, but those things gradually happen. It's the old, what do they say? The old frog in the boiling water. It'll gradually just happens. Yeah. And so you got to really pay attention. For me, the best experiences, you mentioned Disney. Yeah. Disney, I want to say, is probably one of the best management employee culture experiences I ever had, and I'm thrilled to have been there. It's probably the hardest job I ever had, because Disney Finance Department is incredibly challenging. It's a go culture, and you're always on, and long hours, all those things that go with it. Sure. But at the same time, you can get in the elevator at the end of a day at 10 o'clock at night, and somebody walks over and sprinkles some pixie dust on you and tells you, look, tomorrow's another day. And it truly is a culture of everybody working together. And the legacy of Walt Disney is just permeates everything there. And it's fun. So maybe that's the way I would say it, is that the best leaders I've ever worked with, the best cultures, are where you can take things that are incredibly difficult and have fun doing them with the people you're doing them with. Yeah,
boy, I tell you what, I couldn't agree more. I think that, if we can do good work, we can enjoy it, have fun. What more is there in life? I think that's great.
Yeah. So it was a great experience. I mean, I was lucky enough to even, they took a group of about 50 of us. It was an annual program they used to have. I'm not sure if they still do it, but it was sort of up and coming leaders in the organization. And what you did is 50 of you from around the world came together for a week. They put you in the hotel, and then you met with almost all the senior leaders of the different divisions. But you did bonding exercises every day. Wow. And so you were going through just this hardcore, get up early in the morning, go through the entire day. And, it was Walt's vision that he said, if I got it right here, the organization itself, as it gets bigger and bigger, is still predicated upon the relationships that individuals have. Mm-hmm. And so the reason for this program is the 50 of us who were there that for a week. I mean, we were the tightest group of people you could imagine. I mean, it's another story, but we did skits, and there's photos out there of me as a pregnant Snow White that we won't talk about.
Now we have to go Google search those.
You can find it. Good luck.
Okay.
But you know what his vision was, and it was true. I mean, as long as I was there and for years after, that any one of the 50 of us, regardless of where we were in the world, and we were everywhere, if there was something going on in our division, our department, our region, we could pick up the phone and call that individual that we knew, and not have to go through any red tape, not have to figure out anything about departments. It was the relationship that you built one-on-one to say, hey, look, I can call that person up. I know them. I've seen them do silly things. And at the end of the day, that human connection is really what Walt was going for. And I would say I see that today in the successful organizations. It's where you see the teams go out to lunch, go out to dinner, hang out, they talk, they're friends. I mean, right. They say, don't do work with your friends, but you know what? You need to work with your friends.
Absolutely. Why not? Yeah. It makes life a lot easier. Right. It makes work a lot easier.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's such great advice. One last question before we wrap things up, Will.
Yeah.
If you were giving advice to, because obviously you're looking at startups, you're looking at companies in early phases of their business cycles and their business phases. Mm-hmm. If you were to give any advice to a business owner, what would that advice be to be successful in their business?
I'll quote Winston Churchill.
Okay.
and again, I'm one of those ones, I can't rattle off all the books I've read, but over the course of time, I found reading great books about from really well accomplished individuals in all different fields is a great way to really have a sense of perspective on the things you're trying to do. Winston Churchill's, it was never give up, never give in. Mm-hmm. I think that's the name of the book.
Yeah.
And look, startups and most organizations, when you're trying to do big things with limited resources, which is what most folks are doing, you got to just keep going. And there's going to be days when it's really hard, and then you look for the days where everything comes together, and then the next day is going to be hard again. But I found the true entrepreneurs who are successful time and time again, true leaders, are the ones who are willing to never give up, never give in. And it just, that means with their teams as well. You're constantly going to be looking for solutions. Don't let yourself think that what I'll call short-term problems need long-term solutions. Just match your solutions with your problems. And I find that's kind of the trait I'm looking for.
Yeah, man, that's such great advice. It's funny because I'm going to be meeting this afternoon with a new CEO of a startup, and that's such great advice. I'm going to steal the advice and give it to. Actually, I'll attribute it to you, Will. So
well, you can quote Winston Churchill because that way it's his.
Okay, there we go. I'll do that. Hey, thank you so much for being here today, adding so much value. I know the people that watch will get a lot of great value, not only from a leadership and culture perspective, but really just a business perspective. And really, I think you shared an awful lot of things that people can glean and really gain for their own personal growth. So I really, really appreciate it. And that's really what this podcast is all about. So one last thing, if anybody wants to connect with you, where's the best place for them to connect with you and find out more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, probably best is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So that's usually a good starting point. You can also, my email is will@rightplace.com. So all one word, right place.
Okay.
And always looking forward to meeting new folks and talking about things. I'm still learning every day myself.
Love it. Lifelong learner. That's my kind of guy.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, thanks again, Will. Appreciate you being here. And for those of you who are watching this, please do me a real quick favor. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Give me some feedback. Let me know. What did you like? What did you take away? And what are some things that you would like for us to cover in future podcast episodes? So thanks again for watching. And until next time, be well.